Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Kiddushin Nun Beis Kiddushin 52. We're going to start at 51b, 10 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion about whether Kiddushin a Misur and Labia is have a Kiddushin or not have a Kiddushin. Whether or not if the Kiddushin cannot be consummated, or they can actually complete the Kiddushin with bia, which is intercourse, whether or not it's going to be recognized as a valid betrothal. And so Rav says it's not, and Abaye says it is. And so in this context, the Gemara is bringing several proofs against the position of Rav. So we're continuing with the next attempt to disprove Rav. On the bottom of the Nal from Abaye, it says 10 lines from the bottom, Misha Kidesh Achas Mishtei Achios. Somebody betrothed one of two sisters. Ve'eno Yodea Ezu Kiddush, but doesn't know which one he betrothed. Doesn't get wazu, but get wazu. The Gemara tells us he has to give a get to both of them. But that's clearly a proof against Rava, because since he doesn't know which one he betrothed, he can't have bia with either one of them. And yet we're going to say that he requires a divorce for both of them. So, but why? It's a Kiddushin Shem Masur bia. This is a proof against Rava. Mar says no. The scenario here is he knew at first who they were, but now he forgot. He forgot who he betrothed, and that's why he gets mixed up. And indeed, we can infer that that's a scenario. Doesn't say it's not known. He said, I don't know. That's why he has to give them both a get, because the Kiddushin initially took place was valid. And now he forgot which one he did, so he has to give them both a get. But Rava would say, if he didn't know at the outset, indeed, it's not a valid betrothal. So Gemara now is going to go on a little bit of a tangent, because the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, what's the whole Kiddush here? What's the whole purpose of this price if it's such an obvious case? You don't know who you're married to, of course you have to divorce them. So the Gemara says, it's for the next clause that we need it. Next clause takes us back to the Sugya in Yevamos, Mishnah from Yevamos. Mace that if this man who betrothed these two women dies, and he has one brother, and so the brother has what's called a zika. He has this suffix zika. He has a doubtful connection with each of these two sisters that he has to do chalitza with them, or else they can't go into the marketplace because he's not sure who he's married to. So Mace he has one brother. And the brother has to do chalitza out of a doubt with both of them. But let's say there were two brothers. And the first one does chalitza, and once the first one does chalitza, the second one can do yibum echa miyabim. Why? Because if the one who his first brother did chalitza with was actually his deceased brother's wife, well, now the other sister he can marry. And so that's why he could do Yibum. Yibum is just Bia. And if the second sister was the one who was his brother's wife, well, then the first sister was nothing. And so therefore he was also allowed to do Yibum. But in Kanmu Vikanso, Emotzionosam, if they went ahead and they both did Yibum, we don't force them to get divorced. And the reason Rashi explains is because what's the problem? The problem is that you're potentially doing Yibum with your Achos Zikaso, with the sister. You're potentially doing bia with the achos, the sister of the one who you have a zika with, but that is not like the sister of your wife. That's only a rabbinic prohibition. And once this other brother has done yibum, he's removed with the other sister. He's removed the prohibition, and she is now. He's removed the zika, and she can now marry the other brother. So therefore, we're not going to penalize you if they went ahead and did it. And the Gemara explains, but also in the first scenario, that it's only the case that you should first do chalitza and then yibum. But if the one brother does yibum before the other brother does chalitza, that's not preferred because it's possible that she's the sister of the one you have a zika with, and so therefore you're not allowed to have bia with her. So therefore you wouldn't be allowed to have bia with her rabbinically. So now we have another attempt. Tashma Shnaim Shekitchu Shtei Achayos. Whereas again attempting to prove we're wrong. Let's say you have two brothers who betrothed two sisters. No, excuse me. I said this case wrong. It's not two brothers betrothing two sisters. It's two men, not related at all. Let's just call them Gedalia and Reuben. Reuben and Gedalia, they both betrothed two sisters. But Neither one knows which one they betrothed. So therefore, what we have to do is they both have to give the two divorces. So isn't this a proof against Rava? Because they're giving the divorces even though they're potentially married to two sisters, so they can't have Pia. Whereas no, no, here we're talking about a case where they knew who they were married to, and then they got mixed up. Same exact case as before, except you added another man to the equation. So the Gemara says, and Dekanami, indeed we can infer this. It says he doesn't know. It doesn't say it's not known. Shema Mina. So the Gemara asks the same question. So what's the Kiddush? The Kiddush is safe at Strichel. We need it for the conclusion where it says if each man dies and they both have a brother, then the brothers both have to do chalitza to both of them. And now we have another scenario. So one of the men has one brother and the other man has two brothers. What do we do? So the Gemara on top of the Bezim and says that one of the brothers does chalitza with both of the women because out of the concern that maybe each one is his brother's wife. And the other two brothers, what can they do? Just like we saw before, that the other two brothers, it's exactly the scenario we had before. The first one does chalitza and the second one does yibum. And in kamu v'kansu, and if the same exact thing like we said before, if they went out and they got married first, but they both did yibum, we don't force them to get divorced. And it's dafka michlatz v'hadar yivume, v'hadar michlatz lo t'kapaga b'yabam v'osha. That's the exact same case as before. It's just added on the extra piece of where there were two men, and then each man had, and one man had one brother, and the other man had two brothers, but it's the exact same logic as before. So now our Gemara is going to finally bring a proof against Rava that holds. Tashma Tani Tivumi taught over a brisa. What's the brisa? So the brisa tells us one man has 5 sons and the other mechutin has 5 daughters. He says one of your daughters should become betrothed to one of my sons. So under those circumstances, so he says one of your daughters should become betrothed to one of my sons. So each one of your daughters each one of the girls requires 5 gittin, because they could be married to each one of these 5 sons. And so this is a proof against Rava, because each one can never be consummated because he doesn't know if he's being with his brother's wife. Mace, and then if one of the men dies, and then each one is going to require a get and chalitza. And if you want to say that this case is, if you want to say this case also, well, at first they knew they were, but then it got mixed up. It can't be that that's the case that we're talking about, because it says, so he says, I'm betrothing one of your daughters to one of my sons. So he never knew at the beginning which one. So therefore, we see that this is the refutation of Rava Tiyufta de Rava Tiyufta. We've completely refuted Rava. And indeed, the Gemara says, the law is like Abaye in these 6 cases throughout Shas. Whenever Rava argues with Abaye, the law is like Rava, except for the 6 cases throughout Shas. And one of these 6 cases, so the yud is Yeyosh Lomidah Sava Yeyosh. You give up hope on your object without knowing it that you gave up hope. Is that going to be considered like you gave up hope? The ayin is Eid Zomim L'Mafreya. Do we say that the false witnesses retroactively, we undo all the testimony that they've done? The lamed is what we say, if it's a post for an Erev that wasn't put up, it was there on its own, or Tosfos says it refers to the Leidada. We count the days of birth as part of the counting of the Ziva. And then we have the Kuf, this is the Kuf. The Gimel is Gioy Dais Begita, and the Mem is Mumra Ochel Nevelus L'Teyav if he's going to be considered a false witness. So those are the 6 cases of Yalkagam. So now we go up to the next case of the Gemara. And there was an incident in the Mishnah where it says there was an incident with 5 women, and a man took their basket, but it was a sabbatical year, and he betrothed them with it. And we're going to say that under those circumstances, the rabbi said the 3 other women are betrothed, but not the 2 sisters. 2 of the women were sisters, the other 3 were regular women, not related. So Amar Rav, Shema Mina, Rav says from our Mishnah, we learn from our Mishnah, Arba, we learned 4 things. Vinakit, and after Rav said that, Naka Rav Biyadei, Rav held in his hand 3 things. What are the 4 things? And meaning to say, he learned 3. 3 of them he was holding by, but 1 of them he wasn't holding by. So what are these things? Shema Mina. What are the 3? Hamakadesh Perishvius Mikudeshes. So first, initially, Rav is saying that if you betroth with the fruit of the sabbatical year, it's a valid betrothal, because here he takes the fruit of the sabbatical year and he uses it to betroth her. So even though you might have said you can't use it for that, but we see from here you can. From the fact that he stole it from her, but it only works because that it's a valid betrothal because it was the fruit of the sabbatical year. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to. So we see from here that if you betroth somebody with something that you steal, it doesn't work. Even if it's with something he stole from her, and you might have thought she was mochel when she accepted it. And how do we learn all this? Midiktani shelahen, I said it was their fruit. Shel shavias I saw, and it was a sabbatical year. A time of the shvias. The reason why it works is because it's a sabbatical year. The afkaru, so it's not stealing. It was ownerless. Or the shar shenei shvua, but the other 6 years, it wouldn't be effective. Low. And the Gemara says, and then the third thing that Rav taught from here is that a woman is able to be the agent for her friend. Meaning to say, a woman can accept a Kiddushin for her friend, even if it's going to make her co-wife. We learned from here that one person accepted the figs on behalf of everybody. And what's the 4th case? That Rav said we learned, but then he stopped teaching it. Kiddushin shemesh sur l'biyah, because this case in our Mishnah, like we were discussing at the very beginning of the proofs of Rav and Abaye, is a case where the betrothal cannot lead to consummation. And so, but he doesn't say, is he like Abaye or Rava? Because why don't we count him? In Nishma, we should count him. So the Gemara says, no, remember we said on Nun Aleph and Aleph, you could learn that Mishnah either way, and both Abaye and Rav have to amend the text. So that's why Rav stopped teaching it. He saw Rabbi Zera when Rabbi Zera went from Eretz Yisrael when Rabbi Zera went from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. He taught this teaching of Rav in front of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan said, so he says, does Rav really say this? So which Shmaita is he saying? Rashi is saying that if you betroth him with something that's stolen, it's not a betrothal. Now Rav is teaching if you betroth somebody with a stolen thing, it's not a betrothal. So Rabbi Yochanan says, does Rav really say this? Gemara said, meaning to say, Gemara's assumption is that Rabbi Yochanan is rejecting it. He says you can betroth with something that's stolen. But how can you say Rabbi Yochanan says that when Rabbi Yochanan himself says, that if you steal something and the owners haven't given up hope, neither one is able to be makdish it, meaning you steal something from a person. Now, let's say Reuben's watch is stolen and by Shimon. Shimon can't do a Kiddushin with it because it's not his. And Reuben can't do Kiddushin because it's not in his possession. So then why is he shocked that Rav says you can't be Mekadesh with something that's stolen? Mar says, no, Hachi Kamar way. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Zera. Mi Amar Rav Kavasi. Wow, Rav agrees with me. He was shocked, but that's what he's saying. That both Rav and Rabbi Yochanan say you can't be Mekadesh with something stolen. Mar challenges this teaching of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Meisvei Kitsha Begezel. If you betroth with something stolen, or if you steal a coin from the woman, and you betroth her with a mekudeshes, you see it's a valid betrothal. Gemara says, yeah, why is that case valid? Because it's her coin. And when you give it to her, she's waiving her rights to it. So that's why it's a valid betrothal. But in general, if you steal something with a theft, it's not valid. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? I mean, the Tani safer from the fact that the last clause says From the fact that the last clause is limited to where he stole the coin from her, they call it the Reisha because of the Almas. So the first clause is where you steal something in general. And we say in that case, it's a hell of a betrothal. So the Gemara says, no, the Seifa is explaining the Reisha. Perusha kamafarish. The Seifa, the last clause, is explaining the first clause. Kitcha begazel, bechamas, ubegneva. If you steal something, what are we talking about? Where you stole from her and you betrothed it. Hamas Nisan, but our mission. So therefore, that's why it's a valid betrothal, because it's her coin. So the Gemara says, but wait, Nun Bezim Bez at the top. Hamas Nisan, but our Mishnah is the Gazal Tida. Our Mishnah is where you stole something from her, because from the fact that the case of the fruit of the basket of where you steal their fruit, their figs, it's only valid because it's a sabbatical year, but it was their fruit. So it was her fruit, and yet it wouldn't have been accepted unless it was the sabbatical year. So that proves even where it's her stolen item, it's not valid for betrothal. Rav and Rav says it wouldn't have been betrothed in that case. Rav says no, lo kasha. No, okay, we have to understand the context. If they were discussing shidduchin and she accepts it, that means she waived her rights to it. But if they weren't discussing shidduchin, then we're going to say she's just taking her object back. It's nothing to do with betrothal. Now Gemara is going to give several stories. There was a woman, she was washing her foot in warm water. Also, a man came along, he grabbed some money from his buddy or from a person, and he threw it to her. So he says, you betrothed me with this money I stole from my friend. Also, so now the guy comes in front of Rava. He wants to know if it's really a valid betrothal. So Rava says, he says, you're not betrothed to her, and don't think, oh, maybe I have to be concerned with Rabbi Shimon, who says that once something is stolen, the person gives up hope on it, because we don't assume that he gave up hope in this case, and so therefore you betrothed her with something you stole. It's no good. However, so there was a sharecropper, the Kaddish Bemuza de Shamchi. If you chose the woman with an onion, now the way sharecroppers work is you take all the produce and then you divide it up between the farmer and the owner of the field. But in this case, before they did that, the guy took an onion. You're never going to remember which onion you took. It's like a guy in a supermarket eating some grapes or something before he pays for that, and he's not going to say, "Oh, I had 3 grapes." You're not going to figure it out. So you're stealing. So there was a sharecropper, the Kaddish B'muzah de Shamchi, Asla Kame de Rava. So he comes in front of Rava, and he said, so Rava said to him, you betrothed her with this onion. Did the owner of the field forgive you the onion? And so it's no good. Gemara says, when is it no good by an onion? Avokisha, but if he took a whole bag to betroth her, Matzi Amarwa, he could always say to the owner of the field, Ana Shaklakisha, I took 1 bag, Shakalat you take the next bag, Kisha Kikisha, it's a bag for a bag. So in that case, it'll be valid. If you take a whole bag, you could easily measure it. But if you just take an onion, it's not good. Another case is Sarsaya. There was a guy who was brewing dates to make them into date alcohol. The Kaddish Pruma de Shichra, and he was betrothing with the Pruma de Shichra. Pruma de Shichra is the leftover skins of the dates. The Pruma de Shichra, and so that also is supposed to go back to the original owner. And here he was betrothing this woman with these skins of these dates. So he says to him, Amai, the owner of the owner is basically, they had a partnership. There's one guy owned the dates and he gave it to the brewer to brew. And then he's supposed to give the skins back to the owner of the dates. So the owner of the dates comes along and he says to him, why didn't you give her why didn't you give her from the better skins? They're sharper skins. So is that an indication that you're not stealing? Because he said, I wish you would have given from the better ones. We're in 52b, around 10 lines from the top. So he says, so Rabbi says, no, but we have a concept with respect to Truma. I'll say it outside and then we'll read it inside, that if a person goes down and takes a truma from his friend's property for his friend without his friend's explicit permission, then we say if the friend comes and afterwards he says something that's an indication that he wanted you to take the truma, then it's a valid truma. So if he says to him, "Oh, you should have gone to the better food to take the truma," that's an indication that he wanted you to take the truma. Well, in this case, he's saying you should have gone to the better date. So that's an indication. I didn't mind that you took the dates. But the Gemara says, yeah, but we only say lo amru klach etzel yafos elenyan truma bavad. When do we say, oh, this concept that if the person says, the owner says, oh, you should have gone to the better ones? That's only with respect to the truma. By a truma alone that we say this principle. The Tanya Kate said, amru torem shalomidas truma so truma. When do we say if you take the truma without the consent of the owner, it's a truma? Because in the following scenario, Kate said, "I'm retorim shlomi das truma truma." Sheyaro tol sadan chaver. He goes into his friend's field. The weekend for term shlo bershutz, and he takes the truma without his friend's permission. Im choshish mishum gezel. There, if he's concerned for theft, then in truma so truma. He says you ain't no permission to take it. Then it's not a valid truma. Then otherwise it's a truma. It's a truma. And how do we know this? How do we know if he wants him to take it? If the owner of the field comes, the matzah he finds, oh, you should have taken the truma from the better field, and then in nimtu yafos mayam truma so truma. If you indeed find the better field, then it's a valid truma. Otherwise, it's no good. And you abalim, and if the owners were malaktim mosifim. And if the owners were on their own adding into the truma, he's going in and collecting and adding more, it's also a valid truma. But in this case, why does he say give him from the better dates? Mishum kisufu davad. Because he's just embarrassed. He comes and he sees he took his skins. He's embarrassed to say, I wanted those skins. And so therefore, you really stole it from the owner of the dates. And so therefore, since he just said it out of embarrassment, it's not a valid betrothal. So that's sugya. Now we're up to the Mishnah. Introduction to this Mishnah. There's three types of sacrifices that are going to be, or sacrificial food or sacred food, which we're going to be discussing in our Mishnah. The first is Kochi Kachim, second is Kochi Kalam, then there's Meiser Sheni. So Kochi Kachim is the most sacred, Kodesh Kodesh is the most sacred form of sacrifices. It can only be by Kohen and in the courtyard of the temple. Then there's Kochi Kalam. This is also a sacrifice, but could even be eaten by any Jew, a man or a woman, but it has to be eaten in Jerusalem. And then there's the third, which is Meiser Sheni, which is not a sacrifice, but it's food you take from your produce, you take from your property, and you bring it up as a secondary tithe to be eaten in Jerusalem. So it says our Mishnah, Makadesh Bechalko, so a person makes a betrothal with his portion of the animal, Ben Kochi Kochim, Ben Kochi Kalim, whether it's the holiest, the Kochi Kochim, or the Kochi Kalim, it's in a Mekudesh, it's not valid. But Meiser Sheni, let's say he does Meiser Sheni, he uses the secondary produce, then Gemara is going to have to explain this. Ben Shogeg, Ben Mezid, accidentally or intentionally, Lo Kiddush. Rabbi Meir says no good with Meiser Sheni. Rabbi Yehuda says Meiser Sheni, B'Shogeg, Lo Kiddush, Ben Mezid Kiddush. Accidentally, it's no good, but intentionally, it's good. And by Hektish, now there's a fourth thing. If you dedicated something to the temple, B'Mezid Kiddush, B'Shogeg, Lo Kiddush, Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says that if by Hektish, if you did it intentionally, it's no good, but accidentally, it's good. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says B'Shogeg Kiddush, B'Mezid Lo Kiddush. So the opposite of what he says by Meiser Sheni. So the Gemara is going to have to explain the second part, but first it gets right into the first part. So it says our Mishnah, which says that if you're Mekadesh Bechalko, if it's Kochi Kochim or Kochi Kalim, it's no good. Name must need to look Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Our Mishnah must not be like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who said, where if it comes to a person, normally the halacha is that if you steal something from somebody and you deny it under oath, you have to pay back the person plus 1/5, plus bring a carbon asham. But let's say you stole the person's animal that he had designated for, let's say, carbon pasach, which is kachim kalam or a shlamim. So therefore, do you have to pay back the 1/5? Did you steal that person's object? So it says, Umal Amal Ba'Shem L'Rabos Kachim Kalam Shem Emona. Give it Rabbi Yossi Glili. Rabbi Yossi Glili says that kachim kalam you also, because it says Umal Amal Ba'Shem, then you have to pay back the person the 1/5. So we see from here that the kachim kalam is your personal property. So the Gemara says, "Afilu tema Rabbi Yossi Aglili." No, you can even say it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So I'm saying, if Kochi Kalam is your personal property, why can't you betroth it? So it must be that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. The Gemara says, "No, Afilu tema Rabbi Yossi Aglili." You could even say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Come Rabbi Yossi Aglili Mechayim. When does Rabbi Yossi Aglili say that you can't, that it's the person's personal property when the animal has not yet been slaughtered? But after the slaughter, then it belongs to the temple. Why can't you betroth? Because at that point, it's the table of Hashem. That's the reason. You're the once you've brought the lambs and sprinkled the blood, the meat is allowed. So that's why you're getting the rights to it. But that's from the Shulchan Gavoa. And so therefore, that's what even Rabbi Yosef would say it's no good. And Dekanami, Dekatani, Hamikadesh Bechalko, if you try to betroth with your portion, Ben Kachi Kacha, Ben Kachim Kam, will Kaddish, meaning as opposed with an animal, but just with a portion of the animal, it's no good. So our mission is talking about after the animal was slaughtered and the blood was sprinkled. So Tana Rabbanan, so the Gemara now asks the following case, or the Gemara tells the following story. After a mayor died, Rabbi Yehuda says to his students, don't let Rabbi Meir's students come in here. They're just provokers. They're not looking to study with us. They're just trying to get me, trick me. The student Rabbi Meir forced his way in. Meir was a student of Elisha ben Avua. Maybe he had a reputation that he was that they were provocateurs. Elisha ben Avua was Acher. We had him a few days ago. So he said they're just trying to provoke. Pushed his way in, and he says to them, this is what Rabbi Meir taught to me. I'm a Kaddish Mechalko, somebody who betroths with his portion. So Rabbi Meir said, Simcha says that Rabbi Meir said to me that one who betroths with his portion, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Well, guess what? It's exactly what our Mishnah says. So when Rabbi Yehuda hears this, Rabbi Yehuda gets upset at Rabbi Meir. He says, didn't I just tell you, you can't do Talmidei Rabbi Meir Lakan? Didn't I tell you not to let Rabbi Meir's students come in here? They're just trying to provoke me. They're not serious. They don't want to study Torah. They just want to mess me up. Because why are they telling me? Why they need to tell me that you can't betroth a woman with a kachem with this most sacred of food? How is a woman going to be in the temple to get the sacrifice? It's just obviously it's a straw man. They're creating a fake scenario. So why are they doing it? Just to mess me up? Because the food can't even be taken out of the courtyard to where the women are allowed to go. And so therefore, they're clearly just trying to get me upset. So I'm a Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Yomru Meir Shachav Yehuda. He says, we had this in Gemara Nazir. You remember that Rabbi Yossi says this expression also. He says, they'll say Meir died, Yehuda was upset, and Yossi Shasak. And then Yossi was quiet. Divrei Torah, Matei. What's going to be with the Torah? Because there's a very simple reason why they have to teach us. Couldn't a person have made been his daughter's accepted the Kiddushin on his daughter's behalf in the Azar? The daughter's father could have accepted it there. And second of all, the second way is, can a woman herself appoint to any agent to go accept her Kiddushin? And thirdly, what about if she went in when she wasn't allowed to? That's also a possibility. So we see from here that Rabbi Yehuda, Marsha says, how come Rabbi Yehuda can make such a basic mistake? Rabbi Yehuda makes such a basic mistake because he got angry. And when you get angry, then you don't focus on what's simple, and you say stupid things, and we make a fundamental error. So that's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda got upset. And so we see from here that Musar Asku is not to get angry, obviously. Easier said than done. The Pnei Yehoshua give a different answer. He says Rabbi Yehuda really knew that it was possible to be B'Kadish in the Zara, but he said, I'm upset at Sumchus that he pushed his way in to the base measures when I said he shouldn't come in. Rabbi Yehuda thought that he was the reason why he pushed himself in is because he was asking about halacha ma'isa. And he in the end, Simchas asked about something that was not common. And so therefore he shouldn't have done this. And that's why he got upset. I was also thinking that we could say like this: why would Simchas push his way in? He's not allowed in. Yehuda said, don't let any students of Rabbi Meir in. So why is Simchas pushing himself in? You know why Simchas is pushing himself in? Because he wants to show what the answer is. He's saying that how can we have this scenario in where a woman is betrothed in the temple because she pushed her way in. That's how he's doing it. So that's why Simchas pushed his way in. I will stop here. We have the Shachris in 9 minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Shkoyach.